The wind screamed through the trees like a mournful wail, as if it was mourning something lost. Snowflakes spun violently through the air, swirling like ashes from an invisible fire. Beneath the weight of the storm, deep in the Colorado Rockies, stood a shack half swallowed by snow. No road led there anymore, and no one should have been inside. But she was, a girl no older than 8, curled up in the corner of the collapsing cabin. Her fingers were blue, her lips cracked. Rope dug cruelly into her wrists. Her name was Leah, and in the cold, biting silence of that freezing dusk, no one was coming for her. No one except for the ghost that walked on 4 legs. Max had once been a working dog, a German shepherd trained for wilderness rescue. People believed he died in a car crash with his handler 3 winters ago, but death never claimed him. Injured, abandoned, forgotten, Max had survived on instinct and something even stronger. Tonight, that something pulled him through the storm. Scarred and limping, with eyes that burned like smoldering embers, Max was still moving with purpose, because heroes don't always wear badges. Sometimes they wear fur. Snow clung to Max's coat like needles, and each step he took sank deep into the frozen powder. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air that vanished almost instantly. The wind howled around him, fierce and unyielding, but Max pressed forward, moving not from strength, but from memory. He hadn't eaten in days, and the scar on his left hind leg ached with every step. But something in the air, drove him on dot, and then, half buried beneath a blanket of white, he saw it. The cabin. It leaned to one side like a broken spine. The roof had caved in, windows long shattered. No lights, no tracks, just silence. Max approached slowly, every movement calculated. The door hung at an angle on rusted hinges. He nudged it open with his snout. The cold inside felt different, deeper. Stillness settled like dust over rotting wood. The smell was unmistakable: rope, mildew, fear, and something human. Max found her in the corner, barely a shadow against the wall. Leah. Her skin was ashen, her breath faint. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Her strength had been left somewhere in the snow. Max stepped closer, his nose twitching as he surveyed. The ropes around her wrists, tight and cutting into skin already raw. He lowered his head and began to chew. The fibers were stiff with frost, but Max had been trained for precision. He worked patiently, ignoring the sting of cold against his teeth. 1 strand, 2, then a snap. Leah slumped forward like a puppet with its strings cut. Max caught her gently with his shoulder. She was so light, too light. Her pulse fluttered beneath his nose, weak and faint, like a fading echo. He nudged her softly. A whimper, barely audible, escaped her lips. She was alive. Max didn't wait. He crouched low, shifting his weight, and slowly let her fragile body rest across his back. It took all the strength he had left, but he stood. The storm outside hadn't eased, but he stepped back into it again. Because this wasn't just survival. It was rescue. The forest opened into a small clearing where smoke curled gently from the chimney of a cabin made of weathered pine logs. The snow around it lay untouched, soft as cotton, masking the path Max now carved through it. His legs trembled, his breath ragged, but he didn't stop. Inside the cabin, Sarah Whitaker stood at her kitchen counter, ladling hot soup into a bowl. She had lived there alone for the past 5 years, ever since her husband had passed suddenly during a hiking trip. A retired nurse, she had grown used to the quiet mornings, the hum of the kettle, the crackle of the fire. Then, scratching a soft thud of bark, she turned it sharply, ladle still in hand. At the door stood a dog, soaked, scarred, his fur clumped with ice, and slumped across his back was a child. "Dear God," she whispered, rushing forward. She dropped to her knees, reaching for the limp body, her nurse's instincts taking over. She checked Leah's pulse, pale skin, shallow breath. The child was still alive, beautifully, just Max collapsed beside her, finally letting go. His limbs trembled violently, but his eyes remained fixed on girl inside. Sarah worked quickly. She wrapped Leia in blankets, placed warm compresses along her arms, and prepared an electrolyte solution. The girl's fingers were nearly frozen. Sarah massaged them, gently speaking soft words as if the child could hear her through the fog of unconsciousness. Then she noticed the red marks on Leia's wrists. Tightly defined, abrasive, not an accident. She looked at Max, who was lying still but watching. And somehow she knew this wasn't just a lost child, this was a rescue. Leia didn't speak 4 hours. Her body trembled under the weight of warmth, her mind still trapped in ice, but Sarah stayed close, reading aloud, changing compresses, humming old lullabies from a life that felt like someone else's. As dusk fell again, the girl stirred. Max lifted his head first, ears perked, then slowly Leia's lips moved. "Where am I?" Sarah smiled softly. "Safe?" she whispered. "You're safe now." Leia blinked, confusion swimming in her eyes. "The others, where are they?" Sarah crouched beside her. "What others?" Sweetheart. "There were more kids." Leia murmured. "Like me, alone. They found us, them in with the van. They gave us something, made us sleepy. I woke up in a room dark, locked. I think one of them forgot to boot me. That's when Max came." Sarah's heart pounded. "How many children?" She asked gently. "I don't know. I think 5, maybe 6. I didn't see them all, but they cried." Max shifted closer, resting his head near her side. Leia reached out weakly, her fingers curling in his fur. Sarah didn't fuzz it. She picked up the phone and called the police. Over the next few days, Sarah beckoned both nurse and guardian. Leia, awakened by frostbite and a violent fever that turned into pneumonia, required constant care. Sarah called Dr. Patel back to the cabin twice to administer antibiotics. Check Leia's breathing and keep her hydrated. Sleepless nights followed, with Sarah sitting by the little bed whispering reassurance when the girl coughed or shivered. Max wasn't spared either. Their rescue had left him wounded, his thick fur mangled, matted with ice and specks off blood. Sarah bathed him gently in warm water, massaged his wounds, and applied a soothing balm. She dried each patch off tangled fur with care, whispering to Jaime. She cleaned under her hands. Max's eyes softened. He leaned into her touch, tired yet trusting. It was clear she wouldn't just save them once, she wasted into their broken bodies and spirits, proving the kind of heart only true compassion can offer. Within 48 hours, search teams were combing the Irby forest. With Sarah's testimony and Dilla's account, the sheriff had no choice but to act. But it wasn't just humans leading the charge. Max was with them, older, slower, but focused like a flame. Hair traced every path, stopped at broken branches, sniffed spots others would have missed. When the team found a hidden access road covered in brush, it was Max who dug at the edge of it until Butts followed. The rescue came swift. In a locked trailer half buried beneath pin needles and tarps, officers found 5 missing children. Hungry, shivering, Butalive news spread fast. Hero dogs save abducted kids, read the headlines. Reporters came knocking on Sarah's cabin. Photos of Max circulated online, tingling ears alert, eyes proud. It didn't take long for someone in town to recognize Max. The faded scars, the old training collar, too distinct to be coincidence. A former sheriff's deputy confirmed it. Max had once served as A9 unit with the Search and Rescue Division years ago. He had pulled children from collapsed homes, tracked missing hikers through frozen mountain trails, and stood guard during the worst wildfires Cascade County had ever seen. He wasn't just a dog, he was a partner, a protector, a hero with a badge on, pinned to his vest, and a loyalty that had outlived even his team. His name had faded from the rosters, buried under paperwork and a presumed death after a car accident, but now standing in the snow once more, Max had returned, not as derelict but as a legend reborn. But Max didn't care for cameras. He only watched Leia. And when Sarah, tearful and overwhelmed, was asked why she thought dog had done it, she answered simply, he didn't save her because someone told him to. He saved her because that's who is. Max was once a rescue dog, and deep inside he never stopped being one. Saving lives isn't just what he did, it's what he was born to do, and in those words Theto understood Max hadn't just come back to do what he was meant for. The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. Note after the adoption papers were signed, Sarah Whitaker, once a widow alone in Few Woods, became something more, a mother again. The day the paperwork cleared, Leah clung to her waist and whispered, "Do I get to stay forever?" Sarah knelt, kissed her cheek, and answered, "You were mine the moment you walked through that door." Max, too, was made official registered, not just as a rescue dog, but family. Mornings began with laughter, now Leah's voice echoing off pine walls, Max's tail thumping against wooden floors. Sarah had traded her silence for chalkboards and school books. Shahma schooled Leah with the same care Shiance gave Patience, gentle, thorough, with warm cocoa breaks in between. Max, always nearby, sat like a statue during lessons, his ears twitching at every syllable Lilo read aloud. He'd nuzzle her hand when she stumbled, and rest his head in her lap when she got it right. Fekichin smelled like cinnamon and soup most days. Sarah cooked with love, and it showed because not a single crumb was ever left behind. It was routine, it was shielding, and for the first time Lilac knew what home meant. Sometimes rescued us and end with being saved. Semetimus, it begins there. Dinner was quiet that night. A warm stew, slices of bread lauder between spoonfuls. Max rested near the fire, eyes half-see closed content. Layla had drawn him earlier. Big ears, brave eyes, and pinned the picture to fuel with a crooked thumbtack. After dishes were washed, Sarah settled in Harold. Armchair, a book open in her lap. Leah curled beside her blanket over her legs. It was the kind of peace neither had known in years until Sarah's hand twitched. The book slid from her grasp. She gasped, her face draining of color. Then she collapsed. "Grandma!" Ella cried out, scrambling to her knees. "Grandma!" Max jumped up instantly. No bark, not confusion, only action. He bolted to Theodore, nosed it open, and disappeared into snowy dark. Leah fumbled for telephone, hands shaking. She managed to dial emergency services, voice trembling as he begged for help. Meanwhile, Max ran, not randomly but with purpose, down the trail past Thefferson Creek, straight to the house of Dr. Patel, the same local doctor who had once treated Isla's frostbite. 10 minutes later, headlights sliced through the dark. Dr. Patel arrived with a kit in hand and begging CPR. The ambulance came shortly after. The ride to the hospital was quick but unbearable. Leah sat beside Sarah in the ambulance, clutching her hand, tears threatening to spill. Max stayed near her feet, tense and alert. At the EA staff rushed Sarah inside, leaving Leon. Max behind the waiting room was a sea of white lights and cold chairs. Leah sat with Max wrapped in her arms, both trembling with worry. Then the doorstep, Dr. Battle emerged, removing his gloves slowly, his eyes gentle. "She's stable." It was a mild stroke. "But because of how quickly you two react, especially him, she's going to be okay." Aya let out a sob of relief and hugged Max tight. He licked her cheek and rested his head in her lap. They had saved her together. When Sarah finally opened her eyes, she saw Leah sleeping beside her, and Max curled at the foot of the bed. Anna smiled. "She hasn't left you since AO came in." Later that morning, Dr. Patel and 2 nurses sat by her bed. "Do you know how you got here?" He asked with a smile. Sarah blinked. "Your granddaughter called 991, and Max, he ran through the snow and led me back. If you'd arrived 10 minutes later." Sarah's eyes filled. She looked at Max, who thumped his tail once. "He always knows," she whispered. Sarah's room was quiet now, bathed in soft morning light. Machines beeped steadily. The air smelled of antiseptic and clean linens. But to Leah and Max it felt like safety. Sarah reached for Leah's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You were so brave," she whispered. Leela smiled. Shilly was scared. "I was too," Sarah replied, "but you still did it." At the foot of the bed, Max stirred, tail wagging once as if an agreement. A nurse brought in breakfast and quietly left a small tray of bacon for Max, who accepted it with dignity, as if he'd earned far more than a medal later. As Sarah sat up with pillows bent her back, Ela climbed into the bed beside her. Max jumped up too carefully. Curling his body along the edge without disturbing a single wire together, they sat in silence. No one needed to speak because Soma time-chilling doesn't need words. It only needs presence. The day Sarah returned home, Thefrist felt different, brighter. Lighter, as if even the trees had exhaled. The cabin, once a quiet retreat, now pulsed with life. Leia had spent the morning preparing the house with the help of a neighbor, blankets folded, soup simmering, and a hand-drawn sign above the fireplace that read, "Welcome home." Max waited by the front door, pacing softly, tail low but hopeful. When the car pulled into the drive, Leia ran out barefoot, her arms wide. Sarah stepped out slowly, wrapped in a shawl, her smile tired but radiant. "I missed you," Leia whispered as hugged her. "I missed you more," Sarah replied. Inside, the fireplace crackled, the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Leia had made her first solo meal. Vegetable soup, 2 slices of toast, and a cup of mint tea, just how Sarah liked it. Max sat proudly beside Feedable, watching as Sarah took her first bite. "This is the best soup I've ever had," she said, teary-eyed. They didn't eat in silence. They laughed, shared stories, and fed Max too many treats. In that little cabin in the woods, they didn't just find shelter, they found family. Years passed, and the cabin in the woods remained no longer a refuge from grief. It became a sanctuary of memories. Leia grown into a young woman, each line off her face etched with a kindness she had learned long ago. She had become a celebrated author, writing stories of compassion and courage that touch in hearts. Worldwide morning sunlight would find her at her desk, a mug of tea beside her. Sarah's frail but smiling presence seen her be Sarah, now elder and gentle, lived under the careful care of Layla. Theros had reversed. Once the caretaker, no being cared for, Leela would brush Sarah's hair, prepare warm broths, and sit with her by the fire each evening, reading aloud the chapters she had written that day. Max, though gone, was never forgotten. His framed portraits lined the old cabin walls, in the study, the living room, even in the kitchen where he once waited for his meals. Leia's debut book, dedicated entirely to Max, soared to the top of bestseller lists. Its pages chronicled the courage of a wounded rescue dog, the loyalty, often conditional love. Readers everywhere wrote that their hearts had been healed by that tale. In interviews, Leela would say, "Max didn't die. He lives in our memories, in our kindness, and in every life he helped change." And it was true. Every time someone loved their pet a little deeper, Max's spirit lived on. One crisp autumn evening, Leia and Sarah sat outside watching leaves drift by. Leia gently said, "Because of him I know what home really means, and because of you I know what love can become." Sarah reached out, her eyes shining. "Max showed us that healing doesn't end. Love builds forever." And as the sun set, they held each other, continuing the legacy that began in snow and storm, carried forward in hearts and